G'day guys. This video is just to cover a few points relating to the current situation with Jabba the Hutt and sort of different options. People are the Novavaxi option and some of the others and issues of that sort. And what if I've taken it? How do I clear it out and stuff like that people are constantly asking me and are sort of fretting about, future sort of issues like the oncology video that I covered, which covered sort of, should I take the Jabba the Hutt thing? And that was sort of going into, catastrophic issues after 2 years and stuff like that. Now, obviously, being new stuff or new implementations or new formulations or stuff like that without research, the 5 to 7 year research, we can only extrapolate from that and talk about risks, potential risks in that regard. But, it's pretty hard in many other respects. But a lot of, there's a lot of issues that, it goes back to, early virology, looking at, other coronaviruses like influenza and stuff like that. And we know we can get all sorts of effects when, when you actually get influenza, you end up, you seem to get sort of a better immunity profile. But it's not the only story, when it comes to all respiratory infections, even though people in the past may have actually got, let's say, influenza, or they've been, and I talk about issues like getting antigen sin, which means that the body, because it's actually dealt with a vaccine for influenza, for the flu, then it sort of doesn't have the same sort of response to the real stuff. And sort of you need to sort of keep taking the yearly sort of dose to basically provide some level of update of your template. So in terms of your antibodies and stuff like that. And it's the sort of issues. And then we've got other things, complications that can happen in regards to that as well. So it's, when it comes to all coronaviruses, whether it's the influenza, the common cold, and the current crop that should not be named, because the YouTubia, sort of apparatchiks, our comrades at YouTube, do not actually like us talking about these things. We've got to be very careful in that regard. Yes. Zig Heil YouTube, just my dear friends over there, just sending them a little, message of love, like they send me constantly, banning me now and then, sort of taking measures or demonetizing some of my material, the typical stuff, all friendly. It's so friendly and nice, playful, let's put it that way. Anyway, let's go beyond the frivolities and into the crux of the stuff. Now, my sort of view is that at the end of the day, the reason why we don't see in some of the tribal areas in Africa, we don't see these big outbreaks, it's mainly kibble-eating cities where some of the people that were tribal have moved to. Some of the children tend to bring it back to the tribal areas, but it doesn't really have much of a big effect, we've noticed, even though some of the Maasai kids and some other kids maybe at schools where they're given flour, seed oils, and all the other wonderful nutritional garbage, when they do come back, they do have problems with pathogens in the environment. They're not as robust, was noticed by a lot of their parents. So there's definitely an issue there. We've known it within our own societies, how bad it can get. But the reality is that there are things that we can do on the dietary side that are very important in terms of improving our immunity, our immune response and all that. And, recently there's been some, interest in the scientific literature, and some of the actual researchers are starting to talk about it at long last and considering options beyond just the let's boost and boost and boost our way out of this. They know it's not going to happen. Anyway, let me just share my screen. Now, this is out of Nature. It's a recent release. They're actually got a nice, beautiful image here of a T cell targets yes, that one, the CV, yes, here's the particles. And there's your T cells coming in to deal with it. Killer T cells could boost COVID immunity amid new variants. Researchers are looking beyond the antibodies for clues to lasting protection from C19. Concern about CV variants that might be particularly resistant to antibody defense have spurred renewed interest in other immune responses that protect against viruses. In particular, scientists are hopeful that T cell groups of the immune cell that can target and destroy virus infection cells could provide some immunity to C19, even if antibodies have less effective at fighting disease. So at least they're starting to get the message. Researchers are now picking apart the available data, looking for signs that T cells could help to maintain lasting immunity. We know that antibodies are likely less effective, but maybe T cells can save us. Yes. Obviously, they're looking at some sort of product to boost the actual T cells. I will tell you what you can do to actually do that. It makes sense biologically. We don't have the data, but we can hope, or you can have a stake. That'll do it. I'll get into that soon. Now, you guys know that I did a video recently, and I'll put it up here, people that haven't seen it. And it basically covers the reason why taurine, which is a sulfur amino acid, which is very high in animal foods, is basically what boosts T cells. Even the signaling is influenced by our wonderful friend taurine. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the entire thing. They do cover some of the, talking about some of the other variants. Some developers are already looking at ways to create next generation CVs that stimulate T cells more effectively. It's called taurine. It's called a steak. It's called having some extra meat in your diet. That will do it. They always have to monetize when, eat your kibble and we'll give you something to boost it, something artificial that probably will create side effects as well. That's a definite. Now, this is in the BMJ, British Medical Journal. T cells, rapid response we're talking about, really are the superstars in fighting C19. Bloody hell they are. But why are some of us so poor at making them? I suspect it's the kibble eating. Could it be anything else? No wonder you don't see these mass infections in the tribal areas. Why? Obviously, they're eating a species-appropriate diet, getting ample amount of sun and meat and taurine, basically. So they're getting the immune system well regulated with vitamin D, and they're getting taurine in their wonderful meaty foods that they're consuming, primarily those naughty tribal people, and they are boosting their T cells. Anyway, thank you to Dr. Doshi for raising the profile of T cells. Incidentally, German researcher found that a staggering 81% of individuals had pre-existing T cells that cross-react with SARS-CoV-2 epitopes. This fits the modeling in May by Imperial College Professor Fristen, a world authority in mathematical modeling of complex dynamic biological systems, indicating that around 80% and 50% of the German and UK population, respectively, are resistant to COVID-19. So that's basically talking about how these people, are pretty much better protected. Antibodies that can only latch on to and help destroy pathogens, yes. Outside the cells, exactly. And may also occasionally paradoxically enhance a pathogen's ability to infect cells instead by antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE. And that's a problem as well. And we know that's a problem also with the issues with influenza as well in older age. Again, we'll get into it. It's only the T cells that can cleverly sense and destroy pathogens inside infected cells using sensors which detect foreign protein fragments. Exactly. In the late 60s, remember the stuff that I talked about, some of the research back in influenza back in the 60s and all that. I've talked a lot about this sort of stuff. Lancet described the case of a child with globulinemia, a condition in which absence of B cells prevents them from producing antibodies, who overcame a measles infection quite normally and did not become reinfected thereafter. Got it? So this child not only fought, but was also, because obviously T cells came to the rescue. We now know that although this condition can compromise immunity, in particular cases, the rest of the immune function, including T cells, must have perfectly up to the job of clearing infection and establishing immune memory without help from antibodies. The importance of T cells in fighting SARS-CoV-1, which was the original that part of this family, and establishing immune memory has also been well documented and discussed in a number of pre-COVID papers from 2017 and earlier. They knew that good T cell function will basically provide you with much better long-term protection, way better. So when you get it, you end up with far better immune memory. Then early in April, it was reported that two patients with, gamma globulinemia overcame COVID-19 infection without requiring ventilation, prompting the Italian authorities to write, "This observation suggests that T cell response is probably important for immune protection against the virus, while B cell response might be unessential." And also, as we said about the antibody-dependent enhancement, could also be problematic, something that can cause. Anyway, let's move on. All this should have shifted the focus of effort towards T cells at an early stage. Oh, that wouldn't be a good business model, would it now? Kiddies, Pfizer's got to make its profits. So does basically all those other such enterprising companies that do so much good for the world, especially Pfizer. It even handed back $100 billion for all its indiscretions to a whole lot of plaintiffs. Yes, their heart's in the right place, isn't it? Yes, the real question is why mainstream media and other continue to focus efforts on a narrative on antibodies, because they're well funded by Pfizer and co. Is it because vaccines are good for provoking antibody response, but not so great for generating T cells? How fucking obvious is that? Some of the vaccines presently under trial do elicit some T cells, but it seems that neither the quality nor the variants are hugely impressive. Does this matter? Apparently so. Researchers establishment, including Yale, found that in mild or asymptomatic cases, many T cells are produced. So people that have got mild or asymptomatic, that means pretty much they don't even realize they had it, were producing very high levels of T cells. That means, you know, those frontline soldiers that turn up and do the good fight on the front lines. And that's what you want. And also, if there's some cell infections, they go inside and go, I'm going to have you for breakfast. And they take them out. And that's what you want. You want that sort of stuff. You want, you know, your T cells to be, you know, they're ready to go. Very important. And the importance can't be understated. I'll be putting that other video right there at the end, which will cover, which if people haven't seen it yet, and I'm surprised it hasn't landed as many views. What is wrong with you people? You know, information that could basically mean the difference between ending up on a ventilator or not. Anyway, oh, just lost my spot. It's all the excitement. Okay. These are highly varied, responding not just to part of the spike S protein receptor binding domain, but to many other parts of the virus. And that is why you get that long-term memory like you got with SARS-CoV-1. It's because it's targeting and creating a complete picture. Yes. Notably, in these mild cases, there were few or no detectable antibodies, obviously, because if you've got a strong immune system that is well regulated by vitamin D, because T cells also have vitamin D receptors, but the thing that actually increases their production is taurine, because a taurine transport also is involved in this. The video will be there for you guys to go and check that haven't seen it, you naughty, naughty kids. Conversely, and severely ill produce few T cells with less variety, but have plenty of antibodies. So the ill people are producing antibodies, but are very poor T cell producers. Yes, what is also of interest is that men produce fewer T cells than women. God, we get a bad rap, don't you? We from nature. I'm going to have a really severe discussion with God at the end of this life. Unlike women, their T cell response reduces with age. We're really screwed in that regard. Another thing that's really important to know, the thymus that produces a lot of these T cells actually shrinks with age. That's another thing that makes you susceptible. Guess what sort of slows down that, sort of prevents that sort of shrinkage and all that. Things like taurine and a few other nutrients that you find very much in animal foods. I wonder how important flipping the diet, 1950s, 1960s, 70% of the diet was animal-based. Now it's basically less than a third. Yes, I wonder whether that's a contributing factor. Well, without research, we can only speculate. But looking at the tribal areas in Africa where pretty much Jabber has not been seen, and our little virus friend has been doing the rounds, but not really registering many victories in that population. So let's say the species appropriate diet is producing very good levels of T cells, which are doing their job as they should, keeping those little buggers under control. So why are some people unable to mount a good protective T cell response? The key to this question might be a 10-year-old Danish study led by cousin Geis there, head of the Department of International Health, Immunology and Microbiology at the University of Copenhagen. Does it noted that when a T cell is exposed to a foreign pathogen, it extends a signaling device or antenna known as a vitamin D receptor, with which it searches for vitamin D. And if there is an inadequate vitamin D level, they won't even begin to mobilize. Got it? They stay in the barracks. They go, we're not going out to fight. We need vitamin D. You're not giving us the bullets, the weapons. We're not going out to do the war, to fight those little nasty COVID-y C19 buggers. In other words, adequate vitamin D is critically important for the activation of T cells from their inactive native state. The question of whether T cells may be also need continuous supply of vitamin D to prevent T cell exhaustion and apoptosis observed in some serious COVID-19 cases deserves further research. Now, in terms of apoptosis, now there are a couple of issues with T cells. You can get some level of senescence. You can get, especially the older you are, you're going to have more T cell senescence and T cell issues. Now, taurine can act as an antioxidant in dealing with T cell senescence. So not only does it increase the amount produced by the thymus, but it also improves the, it's sort of in terms of apoptosis, and it reduces that amount. That means the loss, and also has an influence in basically reducing the amount of damage that these things are going to undergo from oxidation. Doing the battle, they're getting damaged. So taurine to the rescue again. Obviously, if you're at a low carbohydrate state with improved glutathione status, all those sort of things help as well. So yes. Oh yes, give us more money to do more research. Just give me vitamin D and a steak. That's all I need. High levels of vitamin D are also critical for the first line of immune defense, including physical mucosal defense. I've talked about this on my live streams plenty of times, how your mucosal layers from your nose, mouth, right down to your anus, there are all these mucosal layers, the tight junctions, and the mucosal layer is vitamin D dependent. And I've discussed this at quite a bit in that regard. I've had part of my defense system removed, tonsils. They do create a mucosal thing. Unfortunately, I don't have that. which is very annoying. But, in the old days, I used to just, oh, you got tonsillitis, let's just rip it out, rather than giving you something to reduce the inflammation and then until it all settled down, and then you'd still have an important part of your protective system. But mine got ripped out, and a lot of other people's. So unfortunate. But anyway, I still maintain good taurine levels. At the moment, I usually do about 2 grams and all that. I get a couple of grams from the food. If I was to get an infection, or now in this period that, Tasmania may be opening up and all that, I'm considering just jumping up to about 5 to 6 grams just to keep I've got very good vitamin D levels just to boost the amount of T cells, and I've got enough vitamin D to basically provide to activate them. So I just want more numbers. So I'm just putting a bit extra taurine in there to do the trick. So that's the thing, considering us men are disadvantaged compared to women. Somebody really hates us. Anyway, human antiviral production. What was I saying? Let me start that again. I lost my train of thought. High levels of vitamin D are critical for the first line immune defense. Yes, front line, including physical mucosal defenses, human antiviral production, modulating cytokines. Exactly. We don't want a cytokine storm. We want it modulated, and we want the macrophage to envelop, but not overexpress, cytokines, and which can cause untold damage to healthy cells and other things. Reducing blood clotting. Yes, great stuff. Vitamin D also lowers blood pressure. A whole host of other important immune system functions are, yes. Obese, diabetes, and people with BAM origin are far more deficient in vitamin D, and I've discussed this more. But these people tend to have more fat cells or larger fat cells, which means they will suck in a lot of the fat soluble vitamins, including vitamin D. And men have lower levels than women, again, for the same reason. And we're, again, unlucky on that front as well. As I said, I'm adding to my list of complaints at the end of life. Okay, another intriguing clue is that Japan has the highest proportion of elderly on the planet, but despite lack of lockdowns, little mask wearing, and high population densities in cities, it escaped with few COVID deaths. Could this at least be part because of the extraordinary high level of vitamin D of over 30 nanograms in 95% of the active elderly population, by comparison with the UK level below 20 nanograms? Good association. But there's a couple of other factors. Another thing that they've actually are missing is that the Japanese consume a lot of fish, and fish is even higher in taurine than one. They supplement quite a bit. They're a bit like this. Some of the Scandinavians, they supplement quite heavily, and they've got very good levels. It's sort of the same thing happened in Scandinavia, like in Sweden, where there was quite a lot of free movement. The group that constitutes less than 1% of the population had about 70% of the fatalities. They were people from the Horn of Africa who traditionally don't supplement vitamin D, and they probably need it more than anyone else because they make so little in those northern latitudes because of their dark skin. So they would have been highly deficient in that regard. Also, a number of other pathologies, including autism and many others, are very high in those populations, where back in the homelands, there's practically none. So, yes. I wonder whether vitamin D has something to do with that. I'll let you ponder that. Yes, rates since the 1970s have skyrocketed. I wonder what we did back in the 1960s and 70s to basically create a skyrocketing effect of autism. Ah, yes, that's right. Slip, slop, slap. Put cream on your body and make sure you get no vitamin D. The sun is a bad thing. Yes, that's right. I forgot about that campaign. Very successful at increasing, yes, the thing that I just said earlier. It's associational, my hypotheses. But I'll let you ponder that because the brain requires a lot of a vitamin D for very good development. But we can't say that on this platform because it's inappropriate. We don't want to upset our dear friends at YouTube. Anyway, let's move on. Vitamin D is made in the skin from the action of UV sunlight. Ah, yes. The rays from the sun. Nothing like it. Food usually being a poor source, but the Japanese diet includes usually high levels, obviously because also they consume a lot of fish. But they also supplement. Sunny countries near the equator, blah, 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 have very low COVID-related deaths as well. Nigeria, Singapore, Sri Lanka. Singaporeans, I know, also supplement as well. You know, they're a bit different compared to other Southeast Asians. The results of the first vitamin D intervention, double-blind CRT for COVID, was published on the 29th of August by researchers in Cordoba, Spain. That was the one I talked about last time. I'm not going to go through that because I've already discussed it in that other video that I did. People can go in my COVID playlist and actually can see all those videos that I did before. And my first one was on vitamin D anyway. So respiratory infection. Why? Since vitamin D regulates the enzymes that actually function in the lungs, you know, why wouldn't it be important? Even on that front. Yes, the collagen degrading enzymes, in particular, MMP, matrix metalloproteinase 9 and 2 are the key ones regulated in the lungs by vitamin D. Anyway, let's move on. So, and we know that basically conducting studies virtually eliminated the need for ICU. You know, it was only the and eliminating deaths. It was only the control group that actually had deaths and ICU, people ending up in ICU. Anyway, substantially more vitamin D is required for optimal immune function than for bone health. Exactly what the RDIs are is just for rickets. We definitely need far more. It seems that Dr. Fauci is not ignorant of this, having apparently confirmed on TV that by email that he takes 6,000 IUs per day. And see Dr. John Campbell on YouTube, vitamin D and pandemic science. Since I've been talking about vitamin D since 1919 and earlier anyway, but when the first video that I made, I pretty much told people 5,000 IUs I take 10,000, but I do take MK4. I do get additional retinol. So it's just basically, I have to give a level that I know is not going to, you know, deplete some of the other important fat soluble vitamins. People taking more, yes, then it's fine to take a bit more in the wintry months. Meanwhile, the US health body continues to recommend 600 to 800 IUs, and the UK only 400. Absolutely ridiculous. And they wonder why people have got all these problems. It is high time for join up solid scientific rationale to overthrow mainstream narrative based on alternative science controlled by industry, interest, politics. Exactly. And Beta M. Stabile, the former director of Institute for Immunology at the University of Bern, a biologist and professor emeritus, certainly appears to think so. See Ivor Cummings, episode 91. Emeritus Professor of Immunology reveals crucial viral immunity reality. You know, even the BMJ for putting this out have been getting a lot of stick from YouTube and other social media companies and all that. And this is in a reputable scientific magazine, the British Medical Journal. Are these people for real? In the same way that prior infections protected us against future infections by means of cross-reacting T cells, overcoming COVID-19 naturally offers potential for greater protection against future coronaviruses. Vaccines have their place, but so do our amazingly complex, sophisticated, highly effective immune system, which has evolved over millennia to protect us from a world teeming with trillions of pathogens. Precisely. I couldn't put that last paragraph better myself. We have been basically eating meat, getting enough taurine to support good levels of production of T cells, and we've been bathing ourselves in the sun and maintaining good vitamin D levels and maintaining good defenses. You give your frontline troops, the T cells, what they need, and they will defend your body. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and all and my humorous take on some of this in a world which has moved into the twilight zone and is really getting weirder and weirder by the day. That's all I can say at this stage. Anyway, see yous.